Hi there. My name is Steve Fisher, aka Brown Coat Cal, and I am here tonight. We are Otherworldly Fundraising, a fan-run, not-profit virtual gathering to support various charities and bring fans up close to their favorites virtually. Otherworldly Fundraising was started by a group of friends to use their talents to help others. We're a bunch of nerds, and we want to do things. We want to help charities out. We want to just have a good time and get fans up close and personal with celebrities and artists and writers and a lot of great people. And so every September, we have a virtual gathering. It's a weekend like a comic convention or a pop culture convention, but it takes place all virtually. And every September, that is what Otherworldly Fundraising does as our big fundraising gathering. And every month throughout the year, we hold monthly chats. We're not raising money. We're not doing charity for our monthly chats. What we're doing is we are just keeping our name out there so that people hear us, see us, get to know us, remember us, and then come September, they come and they support us. And just quickly, this September, we are doing Options Save Lives. It is the Options Save Lives empowers and supports individuals using the Sinclair method to achieve full recovery from alcohol use disorder. And we think it's a worthwhile charity, and we're going to be raising money for that in September, and we hope you'll join us. It's going to be September 26th to the 28th in 2025, and we'll have a great time. Tonight, we have our very own Trevor Hawkins, and he's going to be interviewing the artist Carl Wilson. So I'm going to bring them on stage right now.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey.
And I will let you two do your thing, and I will see you after the show.
All right. Thank you, Steve. And thanks to everybody for joining us. And thank you, especially Carl, for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you, Trevor.
Well, and Kristen too was lighting the fire underneath you. So
yes. Yes.
She's a good friend and a good person. So we met at the Superman celebration. So I just love talking about that. Are you going this year?
This year I wasn't able to.
No.
Yes, okay. I'm bummed about that because I was really looking forward to doing it again after last year. But my friend Bill Hood is going to be there, so I'm sure I'll get a lot of updates and stories from him after he gets back.
Well, you will be missed, and your work really adds a good touch to the whole thing and to the alley. So we shall begin.
Sure.
Pop
sure.
Snuckles. No. This should be easy for you. But yeah. So what are your earliest memories about making art, like when you were small?
Well, I started, at least this is what I remember, probably when I was maybe 4 years old. And I've just kind of been, doing art off and on, since then. One of my earliest memories is when my family would go to church. I was very young, not heavily, into sermons and everything. So I would sit there in the church session and draw on either paper I might have brought along or, if they had paper sitting in the pews. So that's really the earliest thing that I could remember.
That's really cool. I too was drawing on church bulletins when I was little. Yes. My mom did it to keep me quiet, but
yes, that's pretty much the reason I did also. I mean, I've never been, really loud and rambunctious. Kind of been a quiet, guy most of my life. But yeah, I think that probably was one of the reasons, just to kind of give me something to do and make sure I wasn't talking and anything else.
Yeah, and probably a good reason for me, in an adult life too, is to give me something to do and keep me from talking too much. But anyway, so what influenced your art early in your life, and then what would influence your art now, as far as things around you, things you remember?
Well, I think early on, I've got a lot of family members that did various kinds of art. One of my aunts was an oil painter. I had an aunt that made porcelain dolls. I had an aunt that carved wooden sculptures. My sister's into a lot of crafts. I think I'm really the only one around still that is into, actual drawing and traditional painting. But I think my earliest influence was a love of comic books. So I think that's kind of what really kind of got me going, doing a lot of drawing early on. When I was little, my mom worked at a doctor's office, and whenever she could, she'd come home with stacks of paper medical forms that, of course, were blank on the back. So I used to draw on those quite a bit. Spiral school notebooks, things like that. As far as influences and what kind of keeps me going now is, I would say, just overall, I am just very much more focused than I probably have been my entire life. I just, I went to college, I've got a bachelor's degree, master's degree, did a lot of work in the IT field. But, kind of, I'm still doing that, but I think my focus has just been, I've spent so much time not really focusing on drawing and painting. So I'd say at least the last 5 years, I've really gotten into it. Of course, I feel like I'm still learning things, but I'm definitely a lot more I'm further along than I really ever have been. Let's see, science fiction, still love comics. Horror, I do a lot of horror shows every year. So I just kind of like doing it all. But I think my big thing is really continuing to work on my advancement in oil painting.
Okay, very cool. That I've got questions about for later too, but just to hold on this question a little longer, who is your favorite comic book character? What comics were your favorite to draw from? I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of them I liked from the two major, comic companies, Marvel and DC. But I will have to admit, growing up, I was a 90, at least 90% Marvel person, with Spider-Man being my original favorite. I mean, there's so many.
Cool. I can't.
Yeah, there's so many of the classic, Spider-Man artists, Marvel artists from way back in I'll say the late 60s, definitely in the 70s, and then the early 80s. I mean, I'm a fan of, a lot of the artists from the 90s, but my original favorites were definitely in the 70s. So.
Very cool. When you drawing Spider-Man, I just instantly think of his costume and all the what lines on the web. And when I was little, I was always trying to connect them painstakingly, but
yeah,
I didn't do so well.
Well,
but
I'm familiar with all the different versions. A lot of the artists brought a little bit different, flavor to doing the costume. A lot of it, looked very much the same. I think until we got to Todd McFarlane in the late 80s and 90s, did it really change. I mean, and I've grown to like his version also, but I'm still just a big fan of, the version that was on in the 70s.
Very cool. Very cool. So you touched on what you do other than art now, but what would you consider doing in life if you had a choice of any career other than art, like right now? Like, what would you? Is there anything else that would?
Well, I mean, certainly I'd love it if one day, I'm able to do art full time and leave the IT job, behind. I love the people I work with, so I mean that's kind of hard to say, but yes, it would be just, well, I guess kind of like a dream come true to be able to do art full time, really get into a lot of painting. Um, maybe one day, if I decide to devote some time to it, maybe actually create a comic book, come up with some characters, and I don't know, maybe find a writer that, I could work with. Um, I mentioned horror, science fiction, art, or comic books. But I am also a big wildlife artist. That's something I've done a lot of, and I've actually I'm working on getting probably about 10 more drawings done, and I'm supposed to be having a book published on just um, ink and graphite versions of just a bunch of different animals. So,
That sounds really good. That sounds good.
yeah.
So, oh, I'm sorry. I was just like, okay. So do you have a favorite artist? Oh, you had something more to say.
Well, no, I was just going to say, as far as the wildlife, it's kind of hard, focusing on that for a while and then coming back over to maybe horror or science fiction or comic book. But it would really be nice it'd be my first book ever published. So I do have, I'm trying to jump back and forth between the two. So I have plenty of new pieces of art to do for any shows that I'm going to be doing this year. I kind of went through the same thing last year. Now, as far as your question about favorite artists, yeah, I definitely have a few. A lot of people, a lot of artists probably mention these two. Frank Frazetta, loved his work growing up. I mean, I still love it. Boris Vallejo, very famous. He was, doing work. He's still doing work, but his big amount of work was right around about the same time as Frank Frazetta. Back in the 60s, 70s, early 80s. So definitely those two. There's James Bama, who ended up doing a lot of Western art, but before he did that, he was very famous for doing a lot of the covers to Doc Savage. He did a lot of early monsters for magazines and plastic models. Love his work. And then Basil Gogos, who did a lot of, if you're familiar with the famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, he did a ton of covers for them as well. So, and the painting I have behind me, the Tusken Raider from Star Wars, yes. I based that on his version of that painting that was on famous Monsters of Filmland. So those are the ones that really, come to mind. I love a lot of artists, but those are the big ones I think I can think of.
Flamingos? Kristen is asking, does that mean that you would paint flamingos? Would you paint flamingos?
I mean, I've got all kinds of wildlife, still to do. Flamingos could definitely be on the on the list. Oh, yes, I do have a tiger. Thanks, Stephen. That was one.
Stephen Fisher's asked. Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely one of my early wildlife, and it just really turned out so well. I just kind of kept on doing more. So
Well, I like your range, and I like that the different subject matters have different styles. So you've got like different facets of you, that come out in different ways, which is really neat to see. And this leads in, yeah. Tell me more about the animals in your art, and then I guess what maybe your childlike experiences about being outside or camping or scouts or whatever. Or
Well, so yeah, I've really loved animals in general. We've got two dogs and a cat here, all rescues. Um, I've just always been a fan of, seeing these things out in the wild. Of course, I don't see tigers, out in the wild unless I'm, going to the zoo. But I did go to the zoo a lot. My grandfather took my brother and sister and I often to the Louisville Zoo, where we grew up. So yeah, I did spend some time as your different levels that lead you up to Boy Scout. So I did get a lot of outdoor experience. So did get to see a lot of wildlife out during that time. But yeah, I'm just a big fan of all the different kinds of I'll just say life out there in the wild. And you probably, I haven't really gotten down to one exact style of art. Some things I do specifically with the wildlife art is I work very detailed. I'm almost wanting it to look very lifelike, but not so much that you can't even tell it's a piece of art anymore. Some things I do a little looser, like again the Tuscan Raider behind me there. But that I think largely was because I was, using a reference from Mr. Gogos. But yeah, I haven't quite settled on one, but specifically with the wildlife art, I definitely, like to work very detailed. And I like the way it turns out. I mean, it does end up usually taking a little bit longer. But
yeah,
yeah, I'm a fan of that style for wildlife for sure.
yeah, I definitely think the line art adds like a cleanness and kind of an academic quality to your work for that. I mean, definitely setting it apart and makes you focus on it, versus maybe sometimes more a looser painterly style. I mean, you're definitely showing how much you care about what you're looking at in the way you do it. So I don't know if I would just even advise you to change styles per your subject. I mean, I think you're doing fine. If they start to bleed together over time, I think that'd be just the natural progression of being an artist. But lots of famous artists had different, phases and styles and different times of their life and at the same time. So I think that's great.
Well, and that's something I'm
do you
actually
have-
considering with the oil painting, is trying something where most of the painting is going to be a little looser, except for maybe like the face or the head on some animal being the more detailed piece, because that's likely what's going to draw the audience's attention. They'll I'm sure they'll probably like the background and sort of the main part of the loose application of the oil paint. But as long as you're kind of getting a little bit detail in the face and the head, yeah. So I'm considering trying that a couple times.
I think that would be nice with the tiger for sure. And is the tiger your favorite animal, perhaps,
Well,
or is
I
it
don't
more?
know. I mean, I just completed like maybe a week ago a bald eagle that turned out really nice, and today actually I just completed a kind of a close-up portrait of a turtle, and I showed it to my wife and she's like, "Oh, I think this is now my favorite one you've done." So Yeah, I mean, I really do love the tiger. That was one of the early wildlife portraits I did, and I still love it. Um, but the more I keep going, I'm certainly not patting myself on the back, but some that I keep on doing, just I kind of are like, wow, I love that one now the best versus maybe some of the older ones. So
maybe true saying like the animal you like is the animal you're drawing at the moment. Your
it could
favorite
be,
animal.
yes.
The one.
Yes, yes.
That's very cool. Very cool. So moving on to another question. Have you ever entered art contests in your life, in your career? Like
Um,
competitions
I
or
won't really count any that I did in school, and that's early school, so it definitely wouldn't be the same kind of stuff I'm doing now. But I think it was 2 years ago. I did enter um, an art contest where I entered three different pieces, and they were all ink based pieces of art. One was that tiger. One was a squirrel with his head hanging out of a tree. And oh, yes, the other one was kind of a portrait of a gorilla. And I did not win in that, but I did get honorable mention for my squirrel, and the original actually sold. So for my very first art contest, I was actually kind of surprised, but certainly pleased at that. So
that's very wonderful. I for me personally, I find I don't necessarily think that competition is the best way to grow your own confidence. If anything, there's so many artists, and then when you apply to a contest, you think you might know the parameters, and then you might submit things that are just really awesome. But if they're not chosen, probably just because you're one drop in a very large pond, um, I find it's better to just do the field of dreams approach. Do what you love, and things will happen. People come, you know. But I do admire people who enter competitions, and then the people who are willing to put their work on display with others. That's just a really neat thing. So
yeah, well, it was my very first one. I thought, I haven't done anything like that before. You know, let me just give it a shot. I wasn't expecting to win anything because this was at an art gallery out in a kind of ritzy part of the Louisville area. Um, so yeah, I was definitely very surprised, happy with all that, and went to the actual presentation that they had. But I enjoyed the experience just more in general. I love getting to see other artists and their work, and I don't know if this led to me getting what I got, but I think I was maybe the only one that did any kind of ink work. Everybody else's was either acrylic paint, oil paint, just maybe some regular drawings. Um, so that might have helped them stand out a little bit as well.
very good. But it's good that you're doing. You did what you loved and you trusted it to succeed. And also having a sale sometimes is better than having the blue ribbon.
Yeah, yeah, for
If they
sure.
weren't going to buy the winning piece. I mean, so
Yeah.
that works out pretty well. And in long lines of sales, what was your first commissioned piece? Like, was the first thing you did for money? Was it in grade school at the cafeteria, or for lunch money, or something
Well,
else?
the the one the one that I can think of, um, and I still do this some, but not a whole lot. I used to airbrush quite a bit, and I still have all my, airbrushes, paints, air compressor, the whole thing. Um, but I think this was back in the early 2000s. I did an airbrush T-shirt of Tweety Bird dressed in a karate outfit, and this good friend of mine that really taught me all about airbrushing. We were doing some I guess some demonstrations at some arts and crafts show or arts and crafts stores, kind of like Michael's. I don't think there's as many around anymore. Michael's is probably the big one. Hobby Lobby's a big one. Um, but this is back when I lived in Maryland, and I guess somebody liked it so much after I finished it at the store, they wanted to buy it. So I guess it was a T-shirt that I actually sold first.
Very cool.
So,
I hope you took a picture of that shirt, right?
oh
Do
yeah,
you have a memory?
I'm pretty bad about this, but I take pictures of pretty much every piece of art I do, unless it's just maybe just like a practice piece and it doesn't turn out really how I like it. But yeah, pretty much certainly nowadays, everything I take a picture of. Just in case it does sell, at least I still have a picture of it.
Yeah, it's really, really good idea for a lot of artists that just to hold on to the memories of things.
Yeah.
Um, so, being an artist, how has that affected how you see the world, your worldview, your perspective of life?
Well, I would probably say, and this is probably true for all artists, or at least many artists, definitely look at things differently. So, like for example, if I'm out, wherever it might be, one of the things I'm really trying to get more into and do much more often is figure drawing, or portraits. So of course, when you're looking to draw the human figure, you kind of might start looking at people that maybe you're out at a mall or a restaurant, or even on a chat like we're doing now. You might look at somebody and actually see how the body breaks down, into oval shapes and cylinders, and, all those kind of things that typically you would use when you're drawing a human figure. So I think that's probably something that has kind of changed the more I've gotten into doing art, is just looking at things and seeing what kind of, the breakdown, what kind of shapes they go into, even, looking at textures, instead of just a, flat, rough or flat, smooth surface, what kind of things make up the texture. It probably is I don't know, maybe an analytical kind of thing where you're looking at these things and seeing how they would break down if you were really wanting to go home and draw something like that. I mean, the same thing for buildings, perspective, looking at things to see, how much taller, is this building next to it? Just, yeah, all kinds of shape breakdowns. So I'd probably say that's one of the big things that has kind of changed the more I've gotten into this.
So it's just, made you more perceptive of the world around you. You just, scan or constantly scanning and looking and breaking things down for elements and looking at the world as things to make art from. Like, really cool.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not like everything I see, I'm going to run home and, necessarily crank out a drawing of it, but
no, but it informs your brain and your perspective,
yes,
and you're
exactly.
always learning,
Yes, exactly.
So very cool. That's good to hear. Very good to hear. So do you prefer an open-ended deadline or a tight deadline that puts you under a lot of constraints?
Well, I'd say I probably prefer open-ended. Just and this is largely because I'm not doing this full time. The biggest deadlines I have, though, are probably when I'm wanting to maybe get, I don't know, 3, 4, maybe 5 new pieces if I'm going to a show. So I've got a big long. I keep a I keep a whiteboard in my office, and I usually, write down, okay, before this show that's going to be in July, I really want to have 3 or 4 new pieces instead of always just taking existing pieces that I've got. However, tight deadlines can make you get things done quicker and not kind of take breaks, or I need to run out to the store to look for a new pair of jeans, or something like that. You've definitely got stuff you got to get done, and because of usually my detailed work, I can't rush through it. I don't like to rush through things, which is kind of why I like the more open-ended. But sometimes you gotta just make changes and get things done. So
has working under pressure ever produced something that surprised you, like on the good side of things? I mean,
well, yeah. Again, just doing some of the pieces I've done, and when I'm done with them, thinking, wow, that really turned out pretty good. And artists are always their biggest critics. I show some of these pieces to my wife that maybe I think maybe I didn't get quite as much detail as I wanted, or it didn't turn out exactly like I was hoping. But you show, other people just, for their opinion, and they usually speak of it highly. So yeah, I'm definitely, hard on myself, but like I said, that's typically most artists do that. So
yeah. Well, and you're looking, every time you look at your work, you're looking at it with memory of every moment you worked on it. Whereas someone who's coming up on it new is just taking it in, top to bottom, side to side.
yeah,
So sometimes the flaws that you think are so huge really aren't flaws, and maybe actually a bit the character that makes things more interesting for somebody. You never know. But
yeah.
and those things usually are more acceptable, I think, to the artist when you're trying to get it done quickly. It's like, I'm having trouble, but we're going to get it. We're just trying to meet the deadline. So,
Yeah, well, like perfect case in point is that turtle portrait that I mentioned I just finished today. I spent a lot. I'd say I probably spent a lot of time with the head and the face and the eyes and the mouth. Where I didn't quite spend as much time was doing the neck. The neck on this particular turtle had a whole lot of texture, lots of what looked like bumps, with a lot of shadow in between those bumps and the rows of the bumps. So I didn't spend nearly as much time because the most of the neck was on the portrait. So going in and getting all those tiny little details probably would have taken me another week, to get through that. So I got enough detail in there. And again, she seemed to love it, but I could tell that I spent more time getting the detail on the eyes and the mouth and the nose and the rest of the head, and not as much with that neck, just because it would have taken so much longer. So sometimes that
probably it's probably good. I'm probably a better piece than perhaps if you had gotten to spend all your time on it. You never know, but each thing has its own life. So
yeah,
and its own purpose. So that's it is what it is.
Yeah.
So we might have kind of started answering this already, but is it easier to draw for yourself or when you're working to give it to someone else? Maybe for a friend or a spouse, or
I think I probably spend about the same amount of time. because of course, if I'm doing a piece for myself that maybe I'm going to take to a show, or if I end up ever, doing another art contest, if it's going to be for somebody else, um, I still want to have that same level of detail and probably take about the same amount of time, because I don't
Mhm.
want them to get it and then kind of have that expression or look of, well, it didn't look like a lot of your other work. Like, I don't want them to think I rushed through it just because it was for them. So,
Right.
uh, and here another case in point, it's not up really close, but that let's say that Frankenstein, Glenn Strange Frankenstein, I'd already done a graphite and ink version, but I had a friend who was interested in having one in color. So this one, I ended up pretty much the same character, same pose, but of course this one's all in color, and this one took me way longer than my original because I kind of did some experimentation. I haven't used marker a whole lot, but this one I thought I could still get it done quicker than doing it in oil paint. But I did this one in marker and he loved it. But this one, yes, I took way longer on this really because of the color. So yeah, I try and make them same amount of time, same quality. Well, in this case, a little bit more quality. Um, than a piece I'd done previously. So I just want them to be happy with what they get.
So you're pretty consistent with your how you think about your work, whomever you're doing it for.
Oh,
Pretty
yes,
much.
definitely.
Right? Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So again, we probably already touched on this too, but I'm curious about your answer. What is your favorite medium to work with? Say, if you were on a desert island and the ship was going to come by with your supplies, what would you take?
Wow. Well, that's a good question. Um, I honestly would have to say oil paint, even though
Really? Okay.
I'm not as far along with oil paint yet. I mean, I do love, I started very early, uh, really just drawing in pencil. And then probably about 4 years ago, I wanted to try out some ink. The very first ink drawing I did was of one of my dogs. And I don't know, it really kind of, I thought it turned out really neat. Never really had worked in that. So I started doing a whole lot of ink. So ink and graphite, I'm probably doing more of, but the oil paintings I have done, I just love the end result with all the color, the blending, just all of that. So I probably would have to say the oil paint. And if I'm stuck on a desert island and I just have a big supply of oil paint brushes
Hmm.
and paints and
Yeah.
all the stuff you typically use, I'd probably be cranking out a lot of oil paint. So I'd be much further along at that point.
Well,
So,
true, true. I really do like your Adam West, by the way, holding the phone, the
oh
red phone.
yes, thank
Yeah,
you,
that
thank.
man, that was really nice. I caught myself staring at that far longer than the others. So, of course, it could be that it's Batman too, but no, it's really nice. So,
Well, I appreciate
um,
that. That
so
that
how much of
that's
your day is? Hmm?
oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm
go
just
ahead.
going to say that's one of my favorites, and that was the first time I tried, you know, a I guess you could call it an incomplete painting. So of course, like I mentioned before, I did a lot of detail and completion on his head and his face and the bat
Yeah.
phone. But a lot of the rest of it, I didn't paint, and I just thought that was a pretty neat look to have a, mostly complete, but not all the way painting. And it's actually turned out to be one of my biggest sellers, for prints at, some of the different shows that I go to, just largely, I'm sure, because so many people know that Batman and Adam West. So
no, but I really like that image. It's like you're choosing. I mean, you've learned and are figuring out, like, the human eye, when it looks at things, it focuses. Like, human eyes don't really see like a photograph or a camera does. So basically, you've got areas that you focus on, and then areas, while we're perceiving things, we let fall back. Like when you're watching TV, the rest of your living room kind of goes out of your thoughts. You're seeing it all, but
Right.
you're really taking in the TV. So when you're making art and creating those areas of tight focus, you're leading the viewer to where you want them to go. And then you're really making more of a connection with them,
Yeah.
than if every piece of the page looked the same. So,
Yeah.
though
No,
I would love
I
personally
agree.
to be a photo, if I was a photorealist and could render every square inch like a photograph. I mean, I keep thinking I would like to do that, but people tend to like, that scattered focus and just how details travel. So you do that pretty well.
Thank you.
So yeah. So how much of your day is spent making your art versus the actual business of selling and talking about your art? How?
Well, I'd say right now, until I get to that, sort of dream time of being able to do this full time, um, it's well, like for my regular job, I might be thinking about some things art related, during the day, but the bulk of it would be, after when I get home and, have some time to either work on something new, possibly responding to, any questions or emails or messages that I might get about, art. But yeah, it would most likely be the weekend, partial weekend. Um, and, once I get home, in the evening where I have time to really focus on that and work on it. I mean, of course, I
So
would
you
love it
probably,
if I got more, messages and
yeah.
emails and stuff. And it just, even though I've been working on the art, more heavily the last 5 years, when you're starting up the business, it takes a while to kind of get your name out there, maybe put things out on social media to show, people the art that you're doing. And it takes a while to build that up.
It does. And sometimes you spend more time of your day, selling your art than you do making your art. And I think the ideal would be spending more time making the art than pushing the art out there. But you do what you have to do, and it just depends. So
Yeah, no,
but the way you've got,
I would be perfectly happy, if I get to that point where maybe I can have my wife do all the, the stuff related to, communications, or, getting shows set up, or, anything related to the marketing or the selling of the art, and just let me do the art. So,
she
but
will
for that,
be your agent. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Yes.
A worthy goal. I think you'll get there. I'm sure you'll get there. We'll get you there. What time of the day? I mean, you can answer this in truth or in a vacuum. What time of day are you the most productive for art?
Definitely in the evening.
Okay.
Now, if it's on the
Night owl.
weekend, I mean, of course, I've got lots of time usually on, Saturdays and Sundays. I don't always, depending on what we might be doing as a family here, it may be in the
Yeah.
morning, it be more, late in the afternoon or the evening. During the week, it would definitely be in the evening, though.
But so do you find that in general your creativity sparks later in the day versus in the morning?
I think it really does. I think it really does. So, I mean, I've been having some time off from work, and although I might be thinking the night before, when I get up the next day, maybe about 8 o'clock in the morning, maybe 9 o'clock, I'm gonna, get into the studio and, complete working on this or get the next one started. And a lot of times it doesn't end up happening until maybe, 1, 2 o'clock. So I have good intentions, and sometimes those do carry through, but other times I end up thinking, well, I've got all this time this afternoon. I'll just go and do it this afternoon.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think most people I talk to tend to be more night people with things. I tend to be kind of on the late side myself. Yeah. but it's just fascinating to see how different people think and work about what they do creatively. So
yeah,
it would be good to be a morning person, but no. So what environment stimulate your creativity the best? So when you're setting up, in your studio, what atmosphere do you make? What items do you use to create your optimal creative time?
Well, it's probably best if there's, and this is where working in the morning would be optimal. My daughter's off, in school. But when she's home, of course, before she gets going on homework, she likes to turn the TV on. And my office, on the main floor is kind of my drawing, I'll say, graphite and ink studio. Where I'm sitting right now is what I call my basement studio, because that's where I do all the painting. So I usually like to work without either not a lot of noise going on maybe in the next room, or it's noise that I want for myself. So it might be turning on like Amazon Music or something and just play some music while I'm working on whatever it is. But the TV on in the next room, I usually don't really love that. But if it is and I can't really avoid it, I'll just put on some headphones and listen to some music. But yeah, I'm kind of work better in the quiet again, unless it's music that I'm choosing to play and not something else.
So like if you could have complete quiet and silence, you would enjoy that just to work.
Oh, yes, I definitely could. I could definitely do that. Yes.
That's really good. That's neat.
Yeah.
I have some friends that are like that. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And the lighting.
Lighting. Yeah, I usually have a good bit of light, again, if it's my upstairs office / studio, I'll have, a light on, and then I usually have a lamp, at my desk when I'm usually doing the drawing. So yeah, I definitely work good in a lot of light.
Very good. Very good. So another question. What are you most known for right now, like with your work? And then what would you maybe like to be known more for, like as time goes?
Well, I'm gonna say probably horror related art, just because that seems to be more of the kind of shows that we typically go out and do. I mean, of course, we'll do comic related shows, but more of them are horror shows, and that just seems to be more people seem to be interested in the art that I've been doing, at horror shows. Um, at some point I may, move beyond that. I certainly would like to get back to doing, I don't know that they really have, sort of animal or wildlife related shows, but those are typically at fall shows. Um, so I would like to get back to doing that. I don't want to be known only as, a horror themed artist, probably not, only a comic related artist. Um, but, as far as what I want to be known for, I think just overall is whatever it is just good art that really attracts people's attention, and stuff that they really enjoy or really think, wow, that is really cool looking, or wow, that is just great art. So of course I don't like to, toot my own horn. I like other people to be able to do that. I can think whatever I think about the art. Usually it's, wow, I really like how that turned out. That's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. But I really prefer having people, kind of really like it, think it's really good art. Let them be the critics.
Okay, Kristen Marie has a question. All right. Oh, Carl, or a statement. Carl donated a Christopher reprint for last year's fundraiser. Yeah, that was very nice. Very good.
Yeah, and that's definitely, of course, I loved growing up. Christopher Reeves, his first two. He was the original Superman in the movies, and I still really like him. And I loved doing that original. That was an original oil painting that I did. And that was actually from one of my favorite scenes, with the broken railroad track that he got down and allowed the train to just, pass on over. So that's why I did that particular scene.
Okay. Well, you've got to tell me about the wood burning, because that has fascinated me for a long time. I've been wanting to try it, and you've done such good things. And so talk about your wood burning for a second.
Well, let's see. You're going to have to maybe give me a little more detail on.
Well, I think you did someone's pet portrait on a piece of wood.
Oh, yes. Well, those weren't actually wood burning, but usually around the holidays is when I do most of those. Although I have done a lot throughout the year as well. They are usually maple slices of wood. They're about 4 inches and they're round. And I've done some, of Christmas and holiday related, but most of them have been basically pet portraits of people's own pets that, of course, they love. Or it might have been maybe a pet that they had that recently passed away. So, it kind of served as a memento. But those are usually, I've done those actually in ink.
Okay, I was going to say that's wonderful. I mean, I was just thinking that's a lot of nice, intricate detail for like a wood burn.
Yeah, no, I really
love it.
Yeah, I really love doing those. And I usually can't get quite as much detail because they're so much smaller. But I found a seller, I think actually on Etsy, that sold those wood slices, and they are so great to draw on because the surfaces are super smooth. So it's almost like just drawing on a piece of paper. Some people have asked for, a little bit of color in it. So of course I've added some color. Some I even did just a tiny little bit of airbrushing on them. But yes, I love doing those. And so far, those have been pretty successful as well.
I would ask and say or suggest that maybe doing some horror theme or superhero theme wood art might be pretty lovely to see.
Yeah, that's actually something I've not really ever thought of, but that may be a great idea. I mean, it's certainly something I've never seen any other vendors, selling at any of the shows. So that
it would be unusual when you do it so well, and like, well, maybe even for like doing like werewolf. I mean, that kind of would almost, idealistically blend to some degree. You could maybe do a swamp thing, on a piece of wood that also might make sense. But no, your stuff like that, it's well done, it's interesting, and it's something you don't see every day. So I was like, really thrilled with those.
And the other advantage to that is, they would be getting an original piece of art, because, those I wouldn't really, try and do any sort of prints off of. It would be considered an original piece of art. So, and it's also, I often hear, and I understand this completely, but I often hear a lot of people will come by the table and, they really love the art, but they just don't have any more room on their wall for, an 11 by 14 or 11 by 17, art print. So this is something very different. It's definitely smaller, and, maybe they would have some space for that. So that may work out good for me.
Oh, I think that would be, you could expand all your different facets and do that wood art. But that just was thrilling to see. And it just evokes a lot of, for me, childhood stuff too, because growing up in the 70s and stuff, there was a lot, I seem to remember a lot of wood art in the grandparents' house and stuff. But as we're coming up on our time, when I really could keep talking to you more, but because you're really nice to talk to. But
I appreciate it.
What advice would you give, like, coming generations of artists, like people, younger people just picking up on it? What would you tell them about the way of the artist from your perspective?
Well, I guess the first thing is, I mean, if you're liking it, always stick with it. Get plenty of practice. I would say don't necessarily. I mean, I know this is probably not a very popular comment, because most people these days that are maybe just learning to draw, don't be afraid to try traditional art. I think a lot of people are very stuck on always wanting to do digital art. And I mean, it definitely looks great. I've tried doing some things with digital art, but I guess, probably because of my age, I'm really stuck more on just loving to do traditional art. But I mean, you can definitely create some beautiful art digitally, but don't necessarily put all the traditional art mediums and canvases and paper and all that. Don't, just kind of kick that off to the side, because you can definitely, number one, you can create some original works of art, and not just something that's, in an image file once you're all done. I mean, it just kind of depends on what you're looking to do or what you're looking for. Maybe you don't care about, any canvases or paperwork. But yeah, don't necessarily just kick that to the side. I mean, it's definitely worth giving it a try, and it certainly wouldn't hurt to be able to do both. But yes, I think the number one thing is probably, just keep practicing. Don't think you're terrible. It does take some practice, but the more you practice, the better you'll get, and it will happen quicker than you think.
That is very sound advice, and I hope people listen and take you up on it. And as we keep coming to the close, it's like, where can people find you online, Carl? What are your handle on
Sure.
events?
Well, my website that has a lot of my art on it, so you can see a lot. CarlHWilsonArt.com is my website, and I've got a page on Instagram and also on Facebook, and I believe those are just at Carl H. Wilson Art.
What does the H stand for?
Henry, my middle name.
Henry. Oh, cool. Very cool. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and it's been really awesome. And I've been, your work is awesome, and you've got such an awesome perspective about it. And I wish you much continued success. And then maybe next year you can come to the celebration too. So.
Yes. No, Trevor, thanks so much for inviting me on here and everybody else. It was really fun to get to, talk to you and, just kind of talk about art in general, kind of my bringing up. And I definitely hope to see you at Metropolis next year for sure.
Very cool. Okay. Here's Steve.
Oh, you're muted, Steve, I think.
Yeah, he's muted.
How's that?
There, that's much better.
Much better.
So I just want to thank Trevor and Carl for doing the show. Keeping the Otherworldly Fundraising name out there. And just a reminder that our main show is the weekend of September 26th to the 28th of this year. And our charity this year is Options Save Lives. And they empower and support individuals using the Sinclair method to achieve full recovery from alcohol use disorder. And coming up next month, our June show is going to be at the end of the month, and it's Cooking Ramen with Bex from Kitchen Witch's Kitchen and Bookish Bex and the Cats. And I'm also married to Bookish Bex and the Cats, and the cats are our 3 cats.
You're married to the cat?
So, yes. So there will be a cooking show next month at the end of June. So we'll, when we get closer to that time, we'll post banner and we'll let you know when it is. And other than that, thank you all for a great show, and we will see you next month.
Thank you all.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.